All right. Okay, so Christians always say that at home and in family that men have to be spiritual leaders and women need to shut up.
No,
and have nothing to do with that.
Okay, no Christians.
So why is that happening?
Why is that happening?
Yeah.
Okay. So number one, that's not happening in widespread Christianity unless we're talking about like fundamentalism.
Okay.
Like in some, I'm not going to deny that in some fundamental groups of Christianity that there is the idea of man is the leader, woman, shut up, be in the kitchen, right?
But spiritual leader, though.
Right. Okay. So those are like the extremes. Okay. And you're right especially in the more in the traditions that hold closer to orthodoxy or tradition, or even evangelical circles. Yes, men are considered the spiritual leaders in the home.
Okay.
All right. Now, if we get out into like mainline,
why?
Okay. Well, let me
hit
this other thing part. If you're talking about mainline Protestantism, then that's really not found as much there.
Okay.
Okay. But you're right in the evangelical circles or in the circles that hold closer to orthodoxy or in the Catholic Church, you're 100% right that men are viewed as the spiritual leaders of the home.
Okay.
And so when you're asking why is that the case, it's actually because, this is going all the way back to, this is when we go all the way back to the beginning. And I know you get on to me sometimes for going all the way back to like Genesis. But we always come back here in every topic. I don't know how it has to do with every topic, but it does. Every time. All right. So let me read a New Testament passage. Okay. And then we're going to put some of it in context here with what's going on in the very
Genesis.
Right. All with Genesis. We're going to tie a few passages in here. All right. So, all right. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Okay. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11, beginning in verse 3, it says, let me back up to you. Verse 2. Now I praise you because you remember me in everything and hold fast to the traditions just as I delivered them to you. Okay. So Paul's, handing over the traditional teachings. Okay. And so to the Corinthian church, he says, but I want you to know.
Where'd he get them?
Where is he? Oh, from his Jewish upbringing.
Okay.
And so from the Jewish upbringing, and then the way that they began to establish this is the traditional, the teaching of the church, of the early church. Okay. So you kind of got both those things overlapping here. And so verse 3 says, I want you to know that Christ is the head of every man, and the man is the head of the woman, and God is the head of Christ. All right. And so it's establishing this point that Christ is the head of man, man is the head of woman. Okay. And so that's where I know.
We've talked about this before, but not in this context. So here we go.
Again. I know. All right. And so, So if you're listening to, just follow me here. Okay. Follow me. I'm not establishing some kind of, woman be in the kitchen and, do the dishes thing. Right. So, all right.
Nobody said that.
But
nobody brought that up.
But people aren't thinking it. All right. I'm just trying to get ahead of it. All right. And so, all right, it's the idea that Christ is the head of man, right? Man is the head of woman. And so it's saying it is putting this place of the man as the spiritual leader. Okay?
Is that the context of this, though? Is spiritual leadership?
Yes, because it's going to go on.
In that context.
Yes, it's going to go on in 1 Corinthians 11 to talk about the role of men and women in church. Okay? Oh. About how they're supposed to, carry themselves, prophesy, pray, da-da-da-da. Okay? And so it's in a spiritual context, all right?
So this verse is not for me to take the context of you need to do everything I say.
No.
Okay.
No. And if you did that would be completely wrong.
Okay.
Right? Because here's the interesting thing, because it says, Christ is the head of every man. Man is the head of the woman. And then it goes on to say God is the head of Christ. Okay?
Right, but that's weird.
Okay, so, all right. Good.
Aren't they the same person?
Good. All right. And so now this is helpful, actually. Okay? Because we're talking about God the Father.
I gotta stop doing your job for you.
No, you're doing excellent, Nate. You're doing excellent. No, but this is the point I was leading to. All right. So to understand what headship is, okay, or in the way we're phrasing it, spiritual leadership. Okay.
Oh,
because when we talk about being the spiritual leader, we're talking about the traditional way of discussing this would be spiritual headship. And you I don't know if you ever heard that phrase in the church you grew up in, but some, churches will use that phrase of, the man is the spiritual head of their family, right? And that's not wrong, okay? But it's an understanding of what headship is that matters, okay? And the function of what it is to be the head, all right? And so let's go to, all right, so Christ is the head of man, man is the head of woman, God is the head of Christ. So what does it mean for God to be the head of Christ? So Christ willingly submitted, or let's put it this way, Jesus willingly submitted to come to earth, correct?
Okay.
So he willingly submits to come to earth.
So suicide.
Well, he is choosing to die, right? We wouldn't call that suicide.
Okay.
But he is willing to choose, he's choosing to come and to lay his life down for the sake of the world.
Okay.
For the sake of humanity, for the sake of creation itself. Okay. And so in that, he's choosing to submit himself to God. Okay. And I know that gets into the things of, but he is God. I get that, but I'm
going to do this all on my own, even though it's exactly what you want me to do.
Well, all right. But so he's
even though you're forcing me.
No one's forced.
I will willingly be forced.
That's not happening here. So he's choosing to submit. Okay.
No, I'm going to lock myself up. Your Honor.
All right. Stay with me on this, Nate. All right. So he's choosing to submit to God, okay? To the Father, all right? So he's choosing to submit. All right. So he's chosen to do that, right? Philippians 2 lays this out really clear, okay? Of how he chooses to submit, humble himself, take on the form of man, okay?
Okay.
So but it's not like God the Father then is sitting there like just demeaning or putting down or belittling Jesus. Okay. Now, because John 3:16 is like a verse that most of us know, right? For God so loved the world that he did what?
Gave his only son.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. All right. So,
or begotten son,
right?
Or forgotten son, or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, his unique son, his begotten son. I mean, that could be a whole nother discussion for another day. But the son submits to being sent. That's what I'm saying. Okay. But the Father isn't like this. Now he's not like this dictatorial, authoritarian individual that is,
because he wanted to do it anyway.
Because Christ comes, and so God the Father's not sitting there like, being again just this awful quote unquote leader, head to his son, to Jesus. Okay. That's not the way this is playing out. All right. So, because Christ has chosen to come now now God in the midst of this is guiding Jesus through his time on earth. Okay. Over and over again, we see Jesus withdrawing. It's, in Luke chapter 5, it says that he withdraws often to be with the Father. Okay. So he's withdrawing often to be with the Father, to hear from the Father, to get guidance, to get direction. And so the Father is leading Jesus in this way, okay? Because remember, Jesus has laid down his all-knowingness. He's laid down his, being everywhere at one time. He's laid down being all-powerful. All that has been laid down, Okay.
Okay.
And so for him to have guidance, for him to have counsel, for him to know, even to know the 12 apostles he was to choose, right? Or the 12 disciples he was to choose to be as the apostles, he spent the night in prayer with the Father. Okay. So the Father is leading and guiding. And that's what I mean by a spiritual leader. Okay. That's what's meant here in the context of a man being a spiritual leader to his family, to his wife, to his children. It's not this dictatorial, authoritarian headship, quote unquote. It's actually very different than that. And so, and Christ is as the head of man. Remember how Christ functioned as the head, okay? Was that he actually came and died, laid himself down for humanity, right?
Okay.
And so in Ephesians chapter 5, when Paul is giving a discussion on, how to, or how men and women are to relate to one another in marriage, he gives a very similar statement of the idea of headship, okay? And so, wives, submit to your husband as to the Lord, because the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. And we immediately get into this, people get caught on that idea of submit, right? Mm-hmm. And immediately it causes these red flags to come up, and oh my gosh, you're asking me to, to lay down all my rights and to not have a voice and to, just be told what to do. But that's not at all. It's in the same connection.
So this is all supposed to be spiritual.
Yeah, because Christ came and submitted, right, to the he submitted to the Father. He submitted to the Father. He's just asking wives to do the same thing he did, actually. Right?
Oh.
Okay?
Okay.
To trust, and this is the idea of trusting one another, because the verse previously in verse 21, it says submitting to one another in the fear of Christ, and then it goes on to say what this submission actually looks like. So men and women are submitting to one another in the fear of Christ, but it plays itself out in specific ways in the context of family. And so wives, be like Christ, who submitted to the Father, okay? And so now, the husband hopefully will be loving and kind and gentle in their guiding and their leading.
Okay.
Okay? And that's the submission. That's the the leading, the guiding the woman, the wife is receiving. Okay?
So I have to be a spiritual leader to my wife.
Yes.
And it can't work the other way around.
And it's not supposed to work the other way around. Okay. And let me finish this. Then you bring up a really good point.
Okay.
Because you got a lot of individuals out there, they're going, well, what about if my husband is not even following Christ? Right?
Right.
But I am. What do I do? Okay.
Okay.
And so let me just finish this thought and then we'll come to that because it's a really good point. And so it goes on to say in verse 25, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her, to make her holy, cleansing her with the washing of water by the word. In the same way, husbands are to love their wives as their own bodies. And he who loves his wife loves himself. And so the whole idea is that the husband is supposed to be like Christ, right? Mm-hmm. Lay himself down. This is what it looks like for the man to be the head.
So the husband is supposed to be like Christ in some ways, and the wife is supposed to be like Christ in other ways.
Bingo. Yes. Okay. And this is the whole idea, the premise of submitting to one another in the fear of Christ. In other words, both are stepping into roles that Christ himself walked in. Okay. And so Christ is not asking us to do anything he's not already done. Okay. And so for husbands, if we're, this is why when I'm doing marriage counseling, for example, I put a lot of the onus on the husband to be the one. Lay yourself down. You need to serve her. You need to lay your own things down for the sake of your wife. This is the role for me of what husbands are supposed to do. In other words, to not just be providers, which has been kind of the Western mindset of what a husband and a father is a provider. And I'm not saying you can't be a provider. Be a provider, but don't be just a provider. Okay. Be a provider who also is willing to say, I'm going to deny self, what I want or what I'd like to even do for the sake of my wife.
Do you run into more dudes that aren't doing their Jesus stuff than women who aren't doing their Jesus stuff?
100%.
Okay.
100%. And this is what's amazing to me is, and I mean, this is a testimony of what's even going on in our own church right now, is that as men begin to follow Christ, and they may not even know the word as well as their wives, right? They may not have followed the Lord as long as their wives. But what's happening in our church even right now is men they're beginning to follow Jesus, get into the word, and even just doing small things like praying with their wives, praying with their kids, those kind of things, talking about scripture. It doesn't have to be this like crazy, super spiritual, I know everything deal. It's just, hey, I want to help point our family to Jesus. Okay. And as they do that, man, I'm telling you, wives just flourish. I mean, like because I think they feel some of the weight come off, from having the pressure of trying to do all the spiritual,
all the Jesus stuff.
They're the ones taking the kids to church. They're the ones praying for the kids before bed. Like when that falls off, and now the husband is stepping into that role, and they're doing it together. Mm-hmm. Like we're going as a family to church. We're going to pray together. At whether it's at meals or whether it's you got little kids before putting them to bed. Or you're going to, maybe you alternate sharing, or reading a little Bible stories or a little, devotionals or whatever it may be with your family. Like, this is huge. And it's not saying that women don't have a part to continue to play in this, right? It's just that now, again, we're doing it together. And this is why Genesis 3 is so important to me. Okay?
Here we go. Back
this is
again.
Where we go. This is why it's so important to me. Is because in Genesis 3, when it said God saw man, man was alone. And God said it's not good for man to be alone. Mm-hmm. And then so he names every animal and all that kind of stuff. And that's still not working. Man's still alone. And because he's been given dominion and rule over animals. And again, that's to care for, that kind of thing over the animals, but they're not his equal, right? Because he actually has a responsibility over them. They're not his equal. And God's not his equal because God's above him. So it's like having an idea of God above you, the animal and the rest of the, creation below you. So God creates female, right? And now this female is shoulder to shoulder with the man. And I think that's where we have to realize it's like, when I talk about spiritual leadership and men being the spiritual leaders, it's not that, all right, I'm in charge, do it. Like, no. That's not it at all. It's not the I'm in charge, do what I say. That's not biblical at all. Zero.
So that just has nothing to do with this.
No.
This is all spiritual, be like Jesus stuff.
Correct. All
right.
And it's like, man, so with Adam, it says that he gave Adam a helper. And that has been one of the most worst translations, I think. It's a good translation. The problem is the way we understand what that word means, right? Like we see a helper as not as an equal.
Why does this stuff get you so worked up?
Because it's been abused, right?
Okay.
Here's the thing. It's been abused.
Have you had to tell a lot of people to stop thinking this way?
Yeah.
Have you said this a million times before in counseling?
Well, not just, it's not. You see some of it here. I mean, we're in the South of the Bible Belt, right?
Yeah.
So you see some of that, with in particular, like the older generations. Mm. But I've also taught this very thing in South American countries where it's a very machoism culture, and it really is much more the man is like, I'm in charge, do what I say. And I'm having to kind of come against that biblically and saying, I realize what your culture is, but I don't care what your culture is. Not that I'm bashing the culture completely, but what I'm saying is in this particular context, right?
Yeah.
Because I love, when I'm in the Latin American culture, I love it. But this particular part of the culture is not biblical. Okay. But I do get worked up about because I think the other side becomes flipped, where in other words, where we have an ultra response to the kind of the machoism, patriarchy that was there. Now it's like there's the flip side of that, and you kind of have the ultra feminism trying to come against that, and the whole word of submit gets messed up in our understanding, and we're not seeing it.
So no one's being like Jesus.
Right. We're not.
Okay.
Here's the thing. We're reading the text through Western eyes, right?
Right.
And not through the eyes of the hearers that would have heard this in the day and time. How would they have understood this? How would they have received this? Okay. And that's why it's so important to read scripture through that lens. But so when we say helper, God is actually like that same Hebrew. There's a couple of words that's put together to get the word we have helper in the Hebrew. Those same those same two words are put together actually to refer to God and actually to refer to the Holy Spirit. So in other words, like God, Holy Spirit is a helper. Okay.
Okay.
And here's what I'm getting to. So it's not my point being is it's not a demeaning word. Okay. It's not a less than word.
Okay.
So woman was made to be to be on an equal footing, equal value with man. But man had a responsibility to lead and to guide his wife spiritually, right?
Okay.
And you think, well, what does that look like in that day and time? Well, for Adam, he was really given yes, be fruitful, multiply, you have dominion, of the earth, But the Lord gave him one command. Don't eat of the tree. Right?
And name all the animals.
Right. Yeah, he named all the animals, but don't eat of the tree.
Right.
Okay? And don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Right? Don't eat of that tree. And so what we see is Eve actually eating of the tree. Okay?
Right.
Well, and then Adam, of course, follows suit. And then everybody goes, well, Eve was the one who messed up. Right?
Right. She didn't help.
Yeah. But not in that sense, right? But here's the thing. Adam was right there, it seems. Like, if you read the context of the story in Genesis 3, it seems like Adam was just right there. Right? And you're just like, what was Adam doing? In other words, he just didn't fulfill his role as a spiritual leader. Okay? In other words, to be the one to say, hey, you know what? No, we're not going to eat of this tree. And not just against his wife. Like, why is he not engaging with the snake that's talking? Right? Let's say if he's there, why is he not engaging with the snake? And even if he wasn't there, and Eve took of the fruit, and then she goes to him and said, hey, the snake told me da-da-da. Why isn't he going, no, we're not doing that. Okay?
No.
And that is why, so he had a spiritual responsibility, and that's why in Romans, Jesus actually, or let me put it this way. So in Romans, Paul writes that the sin came from Adam on down, not Eve, Adam. And why is that important? Because Adam bared the responsibility for it.
Okay.
And so now the sin nature has been passed, it says, from one man, the trespass began, and it's been passed down continually, and that was through Adam.
So did God tell just Adam when he was there to not eat of the fruit?
Yeah, Eve wasn't even made yet.
And he was supposed to tell her.
Yeah. And whether he did or
whether
not.
Whether he even did.
Right.
Okay.
And even the way she hasn't, well, we know that he did because she says, we should not, eat or touch of it. But even the way she says it was wrong. And it was like, did Adam what did Adam actually say? And I'm not saying he
that one's gross.
Right. I'm not saying he intentionally but probably trying to make it more standoffish. We don't even want to look at it. We don't want to touch it. We don't want to nothing, right? Not just eat of it. We don't want to touch it.
He could have built a structure around it.
He probably should have, and so, but my point is he should have taken the responsibility to ensure, hey, we're not going to do this. And so
could he not cut it down?
No, I think I bet the Lord just kept allowing it to regrow would be my guess. And so, but because the whole idea was they had to have a form of choice, right?
Okay.
To follow or to not follow. And so, but my point is Adam bore the responsibility for it. Okay. And so the sin consequence was from Adam, not from Eve.
Okay.
All right. And so this is important because
so Adam didn't tell her the whole how bad it could be.
Yeah, she has in Genesis 3. So she's saying, I can't touch this. I cannot eat at this. I will die. Like, she knows that.
Okay.
So, but what I'm saying is, like, the phraseology was wrong. She's adding in, like, touch. There's no touch part when the Lord tells Adam. And so, but even if that was just like whatever, he should have still had the responsibility to be like, no, we're not, like, we're not going to listen to a snake. We're not going to eat of this fruit. Even if you did, I'm not going to, right? Like, and we'll go talk to the Lord about this, right? Like, who knows what would have happened if she would have eaten the fruit and Adam would have been like, okay, we can't do that. Or I can't do that. I know you just did. I can't do that. Let's go talk to the Lord.
So he let her lead?
Yeah. And just,
is that what you're trying to say?
Or he
neglected his own duties,
his own leadership duties. Okay, and
which isn't letting her lead. It leaves a vacuum of leadership, which is okay.
Yeah. And so my point is that in that so Eve and Adam, in the same way with us, like my wife, right? Like we are equals in the sense of, we both, we parent our kids, we lead them spiritually, we have conversations about decisions. I've never just come home and been like, we're taking this job, or we're going to move to this house, or we're going to buy this car, or whatever. Like, I never make those decisions unilaterally, okay? And it's always in conversation with my wife. Now,
but none of that has to do with this.
Well, it does. And here's what I'm getting to.
Okay.
It does, because it's whether it's decision making, whether it's following Christ, and at the end of the day, she's going to have input in all of it, right? She's always going to have a voice, and sometimes she will say, Joseph, I'm going to just trust you, to make this decision. Like, I trust you to make the right decision for our family, okay? Whether that be because
you're going to go ask 50 other spiritual leaders at church. And God's going to tell them what to tell you, and then you're going to listen and then do it?
Well, and there is a point of, receiving counsel in those decisions.
All right.
But my point is, because she has not just a voice, she has the most important voice to me. Okay. And so, so she's not viewed as less than, but it is my responsibility, as it was with Adam, as Christ says it is for, or as Paul's writing here, and he says, Christ is the head of church, man is the head of woman. It's my responsibility to lead our family, but the way that Christ led, the way that we're being asked to lead, is not from up top, like demanding the woman to follow, but actually like from a position of a servant. Like, Christ came low, not just taking the form of humanity, he came even lower and died for us, laid his life down for us. And so, my point just being is, as spiritual leaders, it's not just this, I'm in charge, let's do it.
So you lead from down here.
You lead from servanthood.
Okay.
Yeah. And we lead from dying to self. We lead from a place of submitting to the Lord. We lead from a place of, right here where it describes, loving and nourishing and caring. Like, that's the same way we're supposed to do for our wives.
Mm.
And so it is a mutual submission. It's a mutual living it out. But then when I take that role as a husband and as a father in our family, and I'm leading us spiritually, and again, by leading us spiritually, I'm trying to do my best to point us to Jesus in not just in going to church, that's part of it, but also just what does it look like in our house to talk about Jesus, to pray with one another, to talk about, the things of the Lord. Like, for my kids to talk about Jesus is not a strange thing. It's not an uncommon thing. It's not an awkward thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's, we sit at the table and we talk about, like, we have like a series of questions we ask when we have dinner together, and we don't do this, every night of the week, but 2 to 3 nights a week, we'll sit down at the table, have dinner all together, and one of the things that we're saying is, I ask 3 questions. I ask, what did you, or 4 questions, sorry. I asked 4 questions. What did you enjoy about, the last couple of days? What was challenging? Something you didn't like about the last couple of days? What was funny the last couple of days? And then where have you seen God, or what have you learned about God in the last couple of days?
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about that. And so my point just being is, discussing Jesus is not an uncommon thing. It's very normal.
Okay.
And I think that's part of just leading our family as well, along with the way that I want the way, they see the way I treat my wife, right? They see the way that, so I'm treating their mother. So that's an example I'm setting for them. And even small things like saying I'm sorry when I do something wrong, asking for forgiveness when I mess up. That's all those things are important in leading spiritually. It's not just in making the decisions, it's in trying to be like Christ.